Lana Payne, President of Unifor, who will speak to you in a moment. Lana and I were just having a meeting, a pre-scheduled meeting, to discuss the situation in our economy, how we can work together across a range of industries, forestry, aerospace, automobiles, and beyond. During the course of that meeting, President Trump announced 25% tariffs against our auto industry. And this is a direct attack, to be clear, a direct attack on the very workers that I stood in front of, Unifor workers I stood in front of this morning at the Ambassador Bridge. A bridge that is a symbol and a reality up until now of the tight ties between our two countries, ties of kinship, ties of commerce, ties that are in the process of being broken. We will defend our workers. We will defend our companies. We will defend our country, and we will defend it together. Les États-Unis sont divisés.
The United States is divided, and that is weakening it. But we are stronger. We are stronger when we're united, and we are united here in Canada. The unions, the government, the society, and workers.
You know, this will hurt us, but through this period, by being together, we will emerge stronger. I think what's happened, and this was part of our discussion, over the course of the last several months, Canadian workers, Canadians as a whole across this country, have gotten over the shock of the betrayal and are learning lessons. We have to look out for ourselves, and we have to look out for each other and work together for each other. And I just want to say a few words before taking some questions about what my government has done to turn that sentiment into reality. We made a commitment a few weeks ago to use every dollar that we collect from retaliatory tariffs to support workers, to directly go to support workers. And last week, we made a series of changes to the EI system in order to take the first big step to make good on that promise. There'll be more. We've announced, of course, retaliatory tariffs. We have other options for those retaliatory tariffs. I have asked for a meeting, I will convene, rather, a meeting of the Canada-U.S. Cabinet tomorrow to discuss our trade options. But we're also providing the option of major liquidity for our companies. We put in place an ability for companies to delay tax payments. We've put in place a large facility for our largest companies, some of them which may be affected by this, would be affected by this, to draw on liquidity in various forms so that they can take longer-term decisions without undue pressure from short-term, unjustified actions. It's also why we focused, in part in anticipation of what might happen, on today's announcement that I made in front of that Ambassador Bridge for the $2 billion Strategic Response Fund. And the point of that fund, the point of government procurement, the point of linking up through supply chains, the point of working with labor led by Unifor, is to build a made-in-Canada supply chain, a made-in-Canada option, so that we are less affected by these. Now, that will take time, but we are already putting in place the building blocks for that. To be clear, we are standing together, standing for Canadian workers across levels of government, and I would add that Premier Ford and I have discussed this already at length, and we will have more discussions in terms of our overall approach. But together, we are stronger. Nous sommes unis, et nous sommes
we are united,
Canada fort.
And we are
and
Canada
that,
strong.
I think we have time for 2 questions before I go to my next event. This evening, I will, je vais observer, je reviens à Ottawa ce soir.
Tonight I will be returning to Ottawa for other meetings.
D'accord. Première question.
Do you have any clarity on how Canada will be impacted and how parts will be treated? And how will you respond? Will you retaliate?
Yeah, this is a crucial question. I'll give a short answer. We do not yet have the executive order. And so there are different variants of the 25% announcement that was made today. One would be that it is only on the, this is still significant to be absolutely clear, but on the part component of a car. Another would be that it's on the entire vehicle. We await the executive order for that clarity. But to be absolutely clear, even in the more, quote, restricted version of this, it is a significant action. It's entirely unjustified. It's entirely inconsistent with CUSMA and indeed the long history of relations in the auto sector right back through the Auto Pact. Oui.
Est-ce qu'on peut avoir la traduction avant d'avoir la question, s'il vous plaît?
La dernière question?
Non, non, oui, en fait, sur votre réponse.
OK.
Oui, juste traduire.
OK. En ce qui concerne les détails, ils sont
in terms of the details, the big question is whether the new U.S. tariffs of 25% will apply to the entire vehicle or whether they will apply only to the parts component. And even in the second situation, it's very serious for us. So at this point, we are waiting to see the executive order of President Trump. But it's clear that this is a violation, and he has betrayed our trade agreement. In other words, President Trump.
Okay.
Will there be an immediate response?
Oui. Pour la deuxième partie, oui.
Vous allez l'appeler?
Oui. On verra. Tôt.
Demain?
OK.
It will happen soon. It will happen soon. I won't say more. But when it comes to our options, we do have options. Even in an election period, we have options. We can introduce retaliatory tariffs, for example, and we will make our decisions once we have met as a Canada-U.S. Relations Cabinet Committee.
I think it would be appropriate that the President and I speak, given the action that he's taken. I'm sure that it will happen soon. I'm not going to give you a precise timing on that. In terms of options, which was the second part of Ms. Martin's question, even during a caretaker period of government, we have anticipated this possibility. We have put in place the mechanisms so that if it is appropriate for retaliatory tariffs, and there's many considerations to be taken in those regards, and I want to have the meeting of our cabinet, Canada-U.S. cabinet, other considerations. We need to see the details of the executive order, but we will take the steps that are in the interests of Canadian workers, of Canada. We are going to stand up for Canada. We're going to be united, and we will fight in a unified way. And I would say, if I may, and I will, Lana and Ms. Payne can speak for herself, obviously, the discussions that we've had, the discussions I've had with Premier Ford, we're entirely aligned in terms of the seriousness with which we're taking this and the seriousness of our response. Thank you very much.
Okay, that is Liberal leader, Prime Minister Mark Carney, along with Lana Payne, the national president of Unifor, which has significant membership in the auto sector in Canada. Mark Carney promising there that every dollar they collect through counter tariffs in response to whatever the full implications of what Donald Trump has announced today will be used to help industry and workers, reminding people they've made EI changes already with more to come. There's liquidity options and tax deferrals on the table, promising retaliatory tariffs, and saying he's returning to Ottawa tonight, which was not in the campaign plan, but that's the type of campaign it is. He's going to have a meeting of the Canada-U.S. Cabinet Committee meeting tomorrow to figure out what they're going to do. The full implications of this measure by President Trump isn't fully clear because they do not yet have the executive order, and what Trump says and what's actually in the document, not always the same thing. And this is the lesson they've learned through many years of dealing with this president, this government. They say there will be a response, and Mark Carney saying it is appropriate that he speaks with Donald Trump soon, not knowing exactly when. Rob, Benzie, Sabrina, Nanji, watching that with me. Look, there's still a lot of chaos and confusion here. It seems to be that even at the low end of the tariff application, Sabrina, because I cut you off to go to the Prime Minister, even at the low end, this is problematic because there's parts, there's multiple parts, there's fully made cars. We're not yet sure how it applies, but what do you make of what we just heard there from Mark Carney?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that Ontario is going to like bear the brunt of the auto tariffs in particular, right? I mean, parts, autos, like that makes up like roughly at least 30% of like Ontario's exports. So like this potentially could be devastating. I also thought it was interesting with the name checking with Ford there that we heard from Carney. You know, he's obviously been, and I think the feds, you know, even before Carney, were sort of leaning on Doug Ford as he's taking on this Captain Canada role. But Ford also seemed to be taking a step back too, and you know, leaving things to Ottawa right now. So it just feels like a lot of uncertainty and a lot of questions, like even you know, over on the Hill, like all around right now.
Yeah. So Benzie, on that, Doug Ford's been Captain Canada. Today he kind of said, "I'm going to leave it to Mark Carney to figure out how the response is." That's an interesting. I don't know if he's taking the cape off and putting it on Mark Carney, but he is deferring to the Prime Minister, at least in the short term here, and the two of them are talking about how they're in alignment at this point in time. What do you make of that dynamic as it evolves?
You know what, David? I thought that Sabrina's exactly right. The thing that I noticed from Carney's response is he mentioned Doug Ford's name twice in a very short statement, and the Premier mentioned the Prime Minister's name a couple of times in a similarly short statement. They clearly are on the same page in terms of the response. I thought that what the Premier was saying about the Team Canada approach is interesting. I think he's also trying not to inflame the situation with Danielle Smith. Remember, Ford is also the chair of the Council of the Federation of Premiers. So he has to be careful that he's representing all of the premiers, because Smith has been on a different side of this issue. She's been very much more of an appeaser of Trump, and clearly that strategy has failed. So I think, but I think Mr. Ford is trying to be magnanimous about his role as Council of the Federation chair. But I mean, if you're Mark Carney and you're thinking, I mean, this is an awful thing that's happening to the country, but it's not unhelpful, just to be cynical, it's not unhelpful for your campaign, because we know from what happened last month in Ontario that when the leader when a campaigning leader is talking about a crisis like this, it helps them politically. It's unfair to those workers, it's unfair to our economy, it's unfair to their rivals, but that's the way it is.
So on that point, Sabrina, this is kind of where I wanted to go, because we're not going to get the executive order in time to do proper analysis of it, but you've both just covered this election campaign where it was all about this, right? It was all about Trump. And Ford, he didn't do big rallies. He didn't do kind of anything that to the big sort of dramatic set pieces other than talk about this every day and go to Washington as often as possible. Sabrina, how do you think this affects the federal election, you know, because you've got so many trade-exposed big centers like Windsor, Hamilton, Kitchener, Waterloo. What does this do in this campaign?
Yeah, it's like that old saying, right? Never waste a good crisis. And it obviously worked out in Doug Ford's favor. I mean, he was talking about tariffs every chance he got. He really stuck to that message, and he ended up cruising to his third straight majority win. And if you talk to, you know, political insiders on all sides of the aisle, they say that that's going to be key for all the federal leaders too. And Ontario, we know, will make or break you federally. I mean, it's almost impossible to win a federal government without, you know, dominating in Ontario. It's never happened, but it's rare, right? And so I think that that's why we see a lot of the federal leaders plucking a page from Ford's playbook. You guys mentioned today talking about protecting workers over at the Ambassador Bridge, like very similar to Ford's campaign launch. Like this is not lost on anybody. And I think that's where it gets tricky for Pierre Poilievre, like what a complete like change of circumstance for him now. And he has, you know, been somewhat, I guess, relatively speaking, muted on when it comes to Trump, right? At least compared to someone like Ford, you know, the other most powerful Tory in the country right now. And so really, I think that there probably are a lot of leaders, not just Mark Carney, who are looking at what Doug Ford is doing or just did in Ontario and try to emulate that.
Yeah, so Benzie, help me just, give me your sense of the mood of the electorate in Ontario. Like, I am in Ontario, but Ottawa is a long way from the manufacturing hub of southwestern Ontario. You know, Merritt Stiles and Bonnie Crombie struggled to sell a message of change when people wanted stability. How do you see that playing out in this national election in Ontario?
I think, unfortunately for Mr. Poilievre and for Jagmeet Singh, they are going to be so far the Bonnie Crombie and the Merritt Stiles in this contest, at least in this province. Mr. Poilievre had a really impressive rally last night in Stoney Creek. You know, more than 4,000 people, 4,500 some were saying. That's a very, very good-sized rally. But then I saw today Ian Brodie, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper's former Chief of Staff, on Twitter saying, you know, size of rallies can be, deceptive. There's lots of things that happen in a national campaign.
Yeah, he said if you've never been on a national campaign, you could assume the size of a rally is a sign of other things. He was very dismissive of its importance.
And David, I asked some of Ford's folks about that rally because I thought that was a really impressive display last night. And they made the point that in the 2022 election, they had 4 rallies and they got 41% of the vote. In the 2025 election, they had no rallies and they got 43% of the vote. So they didn't think rallies helped them or the last time around. So and Doug Ford used to love his rallies. He was really into them. And Sabrina will remember in 2018, it was a big thing for him. But they've, but again, if you're Pierre Poilievre, it's a good thing to do these things for your team. I guess it's a good morale booster. The polls, our poll aggregator, The Signal at the Toronto Star, that Vox Pop Labs does for us, shows that the Liberals will probably win more than 80 seats in Ontario if the current polls hold up, and the Tories would win in the the high 30s. That's not sustainable if Poilievre wants to win the election. Now, it's early days yet, David. Lots can happen, but so far it's not going as great in Ontario for Mr. Poilievre as he would like.
Events, dear boy, events, as they say. Look, I know Sabrina, Nanji, Rob, Benzie, this was not the conversation we had intended on having. We'll have you back for that one, but it was also not the kind of show we intended on having. I want to thank you both for being here. We will have you back. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.